Hi, Mr. Poilievre.
Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to welcome you to our studio. Thank you so much for making the time.
A privilege.
I do want to start off on the economy and more specifically your view of the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs on it. Would you accept a deal that keeps any level of tariffs on sectors like steel, aluminum, and autos?
I would seek a tariff-free deal. I mean, we used to have that privileged access to the American economy, and in exchange for that, we could provide more continental security that would make both our countries more secure and stable. That's the deal that I would go for. And I think that the key back home, though, is to become more self-reliant, strong, and stand on our own 2 feet so that we have the leverage to negotiate. And right now, Mark Carney doesn't have a lot of leverage because liberal policies have made us overly reliant on the Americans. If we were building pipelines and port expansions and moving our resources to the Pacific and the Atlantic to faraway markets, then we could go to the Americans with the ability to say we have other options. And right now, of course, after 10 years of anti-development liberal policies, we don't have other options. And so Mr. Carney has unfortunately negotiated out of a position of weakness.
I want to follow up a little bit on the development side of things in a moment, but when you say, for example, that we at this moment are overly reliant on the United States, under the government that you were a part of, the cabinet under Prime Minister Harper, at the end of that time in government, we sent about 76% of our exports to the United States, about 1% higher actually than we did last year. How can you say that at this moment we're overly reliant, but back then we were not?
Well, because over the last 10 years, the government has blocked all of the major infrastructure that would have allowed us to move tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars of merchandise to Europe and Asia. Our previous government had paved the way for projects like the Northern Gateway Pipeline, which had been approved and would be moving 500,000 barrels of oil per day had the Trudeau Liberals not come in with Mark Carney's support and killed that project. The Energy East pipeline would have been moving 1 million barrels a day to the East Coast, displacing dirty Russian oil and turning dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people. But of course, Trudeau killed that project. And there of course has been the anti-resource law C-69, the tanker ban, the industrial carbon tax, and countless other anti-development policies that have driven about $800 billion of investment out of our country under the Liberals. And unfortunately, that exodus of investment has accelerated under Mark Carney to a point where the National Bank says that the $50 billion that is left in the last 6 months is the worst exodus in any 6-month period in Canadian history.
Do you think it's fair to pin the blame? And I understand contrasting, for example, what's happening versus what they said they would do, but do you think it's fair to pin entirely the blame, for example, for that exodus of investment on this government's actions? We have never faced a U.S. president that has leveled the kinds of economic threats that he has against our country. He has specifically targeted investment as a cause for that, saying, I want investment to come to the United States. That's part of the reason I'm doing this. Like, is it not normal that companies would then follow suit when they're faced with that threat? Is it fair, really, to put all the blame at the government's feet?
You know what I think is fair? Let's hold Mr. Carney to the standard he set for himself. He said he'd have a deal with Trump by July 21st. Still no deal. He said that he would put elbows up. He put elbows down. He said he could handle Donald Trump, and all he's done is make concession after concession on his own economic decisions. Mr. Carney said he would spend less. His deficit spending is 100% more. He said that he would bring more investment, and we've had a record exodus of investment since he became Prime Minister. And finally, Canadian business leaders through the Business Council have said that Mark Carney's regulations and red tape are actually more damaging to the economy, even more damaging than Donald Trump's policies. And that's why, despite Mr. Carney's promise that he would make us the fastest growing economy in the G7, we're now the fastest shrinking economy. And on one last point, he's in Mexico, or just coming back from Mexico. Great laboratory, right? Because we're both next door to the United States of America. So how have we both done relatively? In the most recent quarter, Mexico's economy grew by an impressive 2.4%, while regrettably ours shrunk by 1.6%. Mexican exports to the U.S. are up, while ours have collapsed by 18%. And of course, Canadian unemployment, I regret to say, is 3 times higher than Mexico. So Mexico has the same problem. We both share America as our neighbor and biggest trading partner. So what have the Mexicans done right that Mark Carney's done wrong?
Well, the Mexicans capitulated to Trump. They didn't.
So is Mark Carney.
No, but they didn't levy any. To be fair, they didn't levy
Right.
any counter tariffs. Mark Carney has, in fact, levied some, but not in a totally commensurate fashion. And then you criticize him for that, right? You said it's elbows down if you do that, but you're kind of lauding the elbows down approach of the Mexican government because it got them a better result with Trump. So which is it?
Well, it's that Mark Carney said that he would put in dollar-for-dollar tariffs, and now he's basically backed down on everything. What you don't do in a negotiation, what we're finding is that Mr. Carney, it was a real bait and switch for him to say he knew how to negotiate, because we're seeing him in action now. What you never do is threaten something and then withdraw the threat without getting anything in return. And he's backed down on dollar-for-dollar tariffs, on the DST, the digital services tax, on military spending, on all sorts of other things that he promised to Canadians and threatened to President Trump. And as a result, the president smells weakness. Now the Chinese see the same weakness, and they're hitting our farmers and fish harvesters. So we have far higher tariffs from both China and the U.S. today than when Mr. Carney took office, promising that he would end the tariffs.
But what would you like him to do, or what, I should reframe it, if you were Prime Minister, would you do? Because again, Mexico, you've just detailed, has a much better result. What they did was not put any counter tariffs on. They sent 10,000 troops to the border. Obviously, the problems at the border are different. Like, they are viewed as one of the many countries who, in essence, capitulated to the demands of Trump in order to better secure their economy. Even though it's not dollar for dollar, our government has not done that. Are you saying that you would have dollar-for-dollar tariffs? You'd have 50% counter tariffs, for example, on aluminum and steel?
To be clear, Mark Carney has capitulated. He's removed almost all of the counter tariffs. So
no, 25% remains on steel and aluminum.
He has capitulated on almost all of the counter tariffs. He's reversed himself on everything. What would I do? I'd pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would make us more independent by opening our country for business. We would repeal all of the anti-energy laws and anti-resource laws, the Northwest BC Coast shipping ban, the industrial carbon tax. I would make it so that capital gains tax is zero when businesses or investors reinvest their capital in Canada, opening mines, factories, pipelines, and other job-creating economic infrastructure that would make us more self-reliant and less dependent on other countries. So I've said to Mr. Carney, copy my idea. Take the Canadian Sovereignty Act, pass it into law. Let's unlock a massive building boom in this country through the power of free enterprise. And then we can go to the Americans and say, look, we actually do have options now because our economy is booming and our markets are growing. That's how you go and negotiate a solid deal.
He sort of has, and I'll get you. I hope to get your take on this, right? Because with Bill C-5, right, it allows the government on a case-by-case or project-by-project basis to override many of the energy and climate laws that you just spelled out. I know that your position is.
Can I ask
no,
a question?
I understand. Just let me finish for a moment,
sure,
if I may.
Please.
I understand your position is that the better signal would be to get rid of them altogether. But I've also heard you cite this LNG terminal off the coast of Germany quite frequently, how quickly they were able to get that built. The German government employed a piece of legislation almost identical to C-5 in order to accomplish that. Why, if that is a positive example for you, is that good enough there, but here you still remain critical of the approach?
So we all agree, this is where we can put partisanship aside. That we have the most resources in the world over here, but we have to get them developed and shipped over here. What's standing in the way? Liberal laws and liberal bureaucracies. Mark Carney's solution to too many liberal laws and bureaucracies is to create more laws and bureaucracies. Why not get rid of the barrier that the Liberals have put in place to begin with? Get out of the way. We've got 38 projects that are waiting federal approval today. Get out of the way, approve them. We have hundreds more, according to the premiers, that would come forward, but for fear by the investors that they will be entangled in bureaucracy and legal battles for years. So why not remove the bureaucracy and legal battles and open up our economy to all of those projects? So what we've had with Mr. Carney, by contrast, is he's keeping all of the Trudeau-era anti-development policies that 96 CEOs wrote the government last week saying they wanted removed so that they could start building. And all we've had from Mark Carney is that he has re-announced 5 projects that were more or less already approved, one of which is already under construction so that he can spike the football after someone else brought it into the end zone. Let's unlock the free enterprise system by removing liberal barriers and building everything everywhere.
So let's go back to a time when those barriers, those so-called barriers, didn't exist. I lived through a number of years where former Prime Minister Stephen Harper governed and signaled an openness to pipelines, for example. You cited Northern Gateway. The process that led to the federal government approving Northern Gateway was ultimately deemed by a court to be inadequate. I know that it's the Trudeau government that then decided not to appeal that decision, but it's not as though in the absence of the laws that you criticize, you saw booming resource development. In fact, even with the laws that were in place over the last 10 years, oil production in Alberta and Saskatchewan rose to record levels over the last 3 years.
So actually, oil production is rising everywhere. It doubled in the United States. It has risen far faster in the US than it has in Canada. Investment in Canadian oil has plummeted compared to the way it was 10 years ago. And as for, you want me to comment on the Harper era policies?
Well, no,
because there were 3 massive projects proposed in the Harper era and ready to build. But when Trudeau came in, he killed them. He killed Northern Gateway. And let's be clear, we have to get away from making excuses for the Liberals. Their cabinet made the decision to kill the Northern Gateway. No. They made a cabinet decision to kill the project. There's a record of decision by the cabinet that said we will not go ahead. It was, in fairness, it was an election promise. And by the way, Mark Carney testified in the industry committee that he opposed the Northern Gateway. Furthermore, on that subject of a pipe from northern Alberta to the Pacific coast, today Mark Carney and the Liberals have a ban on increased oil production to put the oil in the pipe, and a ban on shipping the oil out of the pipe.
Both of which they say C5 would override if the case for it was there.
But they're 6 months in and they still haven't said they would override either of those things.
On a case-by-case basis, they have. Explicitly, I've interviewed the energy minister and he said so.
To be clear,
he said that C5 could be used for that. I asked specifically.
Could be.
Yes, they haven't said would be, but it will have to be for LNG, for example. LNG phase 2 would take emissions to a level that didn't fit in BC's climate plan, so they'll have to use it.
They won't use it. So far, they have not said they will use it. They could do a lot of things, but they haven't done them. We're 6 months into the term. If you want a pipe from Alberta to the Pacific, you need to legalize the production of the oil going in the pipe and the shipping of the oil coming out of the pipe. Mark Carney has done neither, and he has not even announced he's done either. And that is why the company that was originally going to build Northern Gateway has already said they wouldn't even consider putting a shovel in the ground for such a project under Carney's current legal regime. But you know what they are doing? I'm talking about Enbridge now. They're building 2 pipelines in the United States of America, creating workers, jobs for American workers, American steel producers, American energy workers. Why is it that yet another Canadian company is taking billions of dollars out of Carney's liberal economy and sending it south? I want to bring that money back home, and we've got a plan to do it.
I guess my question, and my question particularly in around the Conservative government years, was to make the point that what you talk about is a big part of it, but it doesn't fully describe the situation that resource development in this country has faced. There were, even when a government had positive signals around resource development under the previous Harper government, there were many, many obstacles in the way, including genuine opposition to the building of them from First Nations groups, from environmentalists, and they were able to take those cases to the courts and in some cases be successful. Even if they were to get rid of all of these laws, there is no guarantee that any of the rest of that goes away, and that all of a sudden, if, as you kind of frame it and phrase it for Canadians, if you were in power, got rid of everything, we would see this giant boom. I don't think there was evidence of it the last time that was the case.
Well, there is evidence of it. We had the strongest economy in the G7. We went through the great global recession, having the strongest economy, among the lowest unemployment. We're the last to go into recession, the first to come out. Compare that to the present. Well, Mark Carney has promised that we'd have the strongest and the fastest growing economy in the G7. He's given us the fastest shrinking economy in the G7, the worst G7 economy today, by contrast to the best economy that we had in the Conservative years. Part of that is because liberal anti-development laws remain in place. Part of that is because he has ballooned the bureaucracy and the national debt beyond even what Trudeau has done. And part of it is that we have extremely high taxes that punish both workers and investors. All things that I intend to reverse, and that will really create a country where people have stronger take-home pay and we are a more self-reliant nation.
Why should Canadians watching right now treat you as an authority on the subject when for so many months, just on the economy more largely, you told them that if the carbon tax was gone, food prices would go down? The carbon tax has been gone since April the 1st, and food prices continue to rise.
Well, first of all, I was right about the carbon tax. Everyone now agrees after demonizing me for so long that I was right about the carbon tax, and imitation is the highest form of flattery. But you know what I have to say is even more incredible is that Carney has been able to over his increased government spending, which is staggering. He's doubled the deficit in 6 months, has flooded our economy with printed cash, which is ultimately causing inflation. Now, it is true that the CPI is lower than it would otherwise be, and everyone agrees, all the economists, I think even the Bank of Canada, that that is because of the carbon tax. You're welcome. But when you flood the economy with hundreds of billions of dollars of extra printed money, as Mr. Carney is doing, you cause inflation in every other area of life. And what really worries me is that once the carbon tax elimination rolls off the monthly inflation measurement early next year, we're going to see really high rates of inflation. We're already seeing it in the core readings. We're already seeing it in the food prices that are rising 70% faster than the Bank of Canada's target, with 4 million visits to Toronto food banks. Mark Carney is doing the Justin Trudeau inflationary spending on steroids, and I'm very concerned this is going to cause serious human suffering.
But the statistics around inflation show that even food inflation from the first month after the carbon tax was cut outpaced regular inflation. The promise you specifically and your colleagues made to Canadians was food prices would go down if the carbon tax is eliminated. That didn't happen. Why should you be treated as an authority more largely on what the government should do on the economy?
Well, I'll tell you why I should be treated as an authority on this one, Vashi, is because I said that Carney would only suspend the carbon tax before the election and then bring in a new one after the election, and that's what he's doing. The fuel standard, the Canadian fuel standard, that he's bringing in.
That was in existence already.
But it's rising every year, and it is going to get to 17 cents a litre. According to the parliamentary budget officer, what was the old carbon tax? 17 cents a litre. So just as I predicted that he would bring back a carbon tax, he is doing that. And we don't know yet exactly what the impacts will be on food prices, but we can be sure it's a lot. Because whenever you raise fuel prices...
But what you said didn't happen. I have to respectfully challenge you. I take what you're saying about the clean fuel standards, okay? But you didn't say, oh, but there will be the clean fuel... You said, if the carbon tax is gone, food prices are down.
But he's brought in a new carbon tax.
But he didn't. It was already in place. That policy set existed when you were making those comments.
Right, and it's growing. And it's hard to keep track of all the liberal taxes. There's so many of them. It's like, which one are we talking about? But this is another 17 cent a litre tax. And as I said, whatever benefit that Canadians got from the elimination of the carbon tax, Mr. Carney has obviated, he has nullified with massive new money printing deficits that are even worse than the ones that Trudeau left behind.
Is there no way in the world to justify any of the extra money that he is essentially dealing with? And I'll tell you how he framed his own comment last week about a more substantial deficit, I think is what he said. Increased costs to deal with the economic impact, like supports for people and sectors that have been very hard hit. I think we can agree, like, the tariffs are out of his control, I mean, to the degree that the president had decided the level of them. And the second impact is just simply from the tariffs themselves and the compressive factor that has on revenues for the government. Like, wouldn't you be dealing with the exact same situation?
Very differently. So why would the trade dispute have required he increase spending on consultants by 37%? We're now, this Liberal government under Mark Carney is spending the equivalent of $1,400 per Canadian family on consultants. That's more than a 100% increase. He said he'd spend less on bureaucracy. The cost of the bureaucracy is up 6% year over year. He's adding more bureaucrats. He's increasing foreign aid, sending our money out of our country at a time when we don't have enough here at home. He's giving more money to fraudulent refugee claims and corporate welfare. None of those things were imposed on him by a decision by a foreign leader. These are decisions he made at home. They would have been irresponsible had there been no trade dispute. They're even more reckless now because we can least afford to waste money when we're confronting a serious dispute with our biggest trading partner.
He has intimated that there will be some sort of adjustment to the public service. To be fair, during your campaign, you also said there would be cuts, but didn't detail to what degree they would come. How much should the federal government cut the public service, to be exact?
There needs to be billions of dollars of reductions in the federal bureaucracy, and we need to cut the consultants in half. So he should cut the budget for consultants by at least $12 billion.
And what about the budget for public service workers, which right now is at $71.5 billion?
Well, we should reverse the cost of the bureaucracy back at least 5 years to the pre-COVID era. I mean, how is it that we were able to deliver all these services 5 years ago with 40%, 30% less bureaucrats and less bureaucratic spending? We don't need more bureaucracy. We need to leave money in the pockets of entrepreneurs and workers who will generate the real growth for our country.
What do you say to people who hold those jobs, many of whom used to be in your old riding, who will be a factor in the new unemployment rate, who have to look at their families when losing their jobs and figure out a way to support them?
It's very difficult, and of course right now the reality is that we're in a liberal jobs crisis. The unemployment rate is skyrocketing. Since Mr. Carney became Prime Minister, 86,000 people have lost their jobs. The answer to that, though, it surely cannot be to build the bureaucracy. I mean, if a bigger bureaucracy was going to make for a good job market, then we'd have the best job market in the world, because liberals have done nothing but spend on bureaucracy and government consultants. What we need is private sector employment. We need businesses to hire more people, giving them paychecks, producing things, goods and services that the country needs. And unfortunately, that's going to be tough. I made the decision to be honest about people during the election. Mr. Carney once again pulled a bait and switch.
Well, to be fair, you just said that there'd be cuts. You didn't detail the degree to which you would.
We did actually. I don't have my platform in front of me, but we did have the dollar figures that we plan to save. I think it was
$56 billion
right.
is what your total was, but you didn't break that down.
We did break it down by public service, consultants,
so how many thousands of Canadians should lose their job in the public service?
Hundreds of thousands of Canadians could gain their jobs, should gain jobs. And that's what we will do when we get rid of the capital gains tax on businesses that reinvest in this country. When we cut taxes on workers, they spend more at local restaurants. When we approve more projects free in the resource sector, all of those welders, pipe fitters, carpenters, though not only employ themselves, but then they go and spend at local hotels and restaurants, creating even more jobs. I'm proposing a boom in job creation. That is what our Conservative plan is, and we encourage the Liberals to adopt it.
And I take your point on all that, and with respect, my question was how many public servants should lose their jobs, not how many private sector jobs should be created.
Well, it's a combination of the two, and you know, we still have some time before the next election when you'll see our platform.
Well, maybe. You never know.
You never know.
It's a minority.
I'm better at predicting the past than the future, but I appreciate your impatience. You're asking the right questions, and I can tell you you'll have the right answers before you go voting in the next election. Our job right now as official opposition is to signal the direction, which is we need less money for bureaucracy and more money for taxpayers and job creators.
One more question, if you'll permit me, on another vote that you're going to face, and that's the leadership review in January. Do you have a magic number?
No, I don't believe in magic.
Do you have a number at which you think you need in order to remain as leader?
I don't know.
Why not?
I'll be working to win over the people of the Conservative Party who will be there, and our message will be that I'm the leader that will bring forward the Canada, that will restore the promise of the country, where hard work gets you a great life, an affordable life, a safe life under our proud flag. And you know, the magic number will be when we win the next election, which we will.
Should I take anything, though, away from the fact that you don't want to put a number on it, as far as a lack of confidence that you'll be able to secure the full support of your party?
No.
Then why won't you put a number on it?
Because the people will decide, and then you'll see the number.
Okay, I will wait for that.
All right.
Mr. Poilievre, I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time.
Lots of anticipation I've left you with.
No, very much. Edge of my seat.
Great
Thanks
to
a
be
lot,
with
sir.
you. Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
having me.